Hey, it's Mike G back here with Logical Raptors Fanatic, and I'm gonna go over our big finale, the kind of what this whole series has been leading up to. I think the numbers will be very stark and kind of let people know kind of how this is all gonna work out because it's very simple, a lot of this cap stuff, once you kind of figure out the mechanics involved and understanding each player and what how value is generated and stuff like that is really part of it too, I think. So obviously there's the first part where we went through Precious, OG, Gary Trent, Fred VanVleet, and Pascal Siakam. Each went through their roles, what kind of money they were looking at, and then ultimately decided on a range. I think I played the ranges of money in the middle of the ranges I gave. And the years I sided for 4 years and 3 years for Precious. I think the OG fourth year wasn't really needed there. I think it depends if he's here or not. It depends, right? But I think past that season, for sure, we're at least gonna have Pascal Siakam and Scotty Barnes. So that's there to kind of represent that. So okay, let's start going over what all these numbers look like because it's kind of confusing at first. You're looking at like what's this number, what's that number, what's all this. So first player we have here, Pascal Siakam. He makes this much money next year. So he makes 35 million and about a half next year, and then the year after we still have him under control. He makes 37. So this is where it starts. So this was his free agency year, and I kind of penciled in that 30% max. The first year 41, second year 43, and then so on, right? And then we went to Fred VanVleet. We have him under contract for this year. And then this summer, he had a player option, which we discussed. And ultimately, I went with him turning it down and signing maybe a 4 year contract similar to Lowry in a sense, that 30 million kind of range number. We talked about the salary cap spike. Obviously, it hits a lot higher. And I'll get into these numbers in a second. Hold on. But so yeah, we penciled in Fred VanVleet's money, and then we went to Gary Trent and kind of looked at him and his role and all that, and kind of decided he's probably going to decline his player option next summer, and then we kind of penciled in the number we were looking at for him. With OG, he has 2 more years of control, so he is actually signed through next summer. So we do have time, but I think in a trade, the asset that's going to fetch more is the one that has another year kind of control. If we were just to trade Gary Trent, I think we'd get a lot less because he is, well, he could be a free agent easily next year. So the trade wouldn't really have a lot of value for the team trading because they could lose him either way. We could lose him, but they could lose him probably more, right? So, okay. And we have Precious down here where we filled in what he would get. I think the team will try to be, because the cap number is looking crazy, so I think they would probably accept that team option and then look to sign him to something like the Gary Trent extension or OG extension minus 1 year. I think because of the age range, you could see that maybe the fourth year, but that I think that's nor here nor there. We're trying to look at the next couple of years right now. So okay, and the final number I entered in for salaries, I think is probably a guarantee. Scotty Barnes will get his 25% max contract. Like we went over it in the Siakam video, max contracts work on percentages. And I did actually check out what the requirements are for offering those max contracts. And it's based on years in the NBA. So 0 to 6 years, you can offer a 25% max. 7 to 10, you can offer a 30, and then after 10, you can offer the Supermax 35%. So when I was talking about Pascal Siakam's extension in that video, I didn't know whether he would be eligible for the 10-year. So that's the eligibility of percentages for that max contract. So obviously, if Scotty gets an All NBA or MVP, we saw the bonus triggers in that kind of designated rookie extension. That number could jump, so we have to keep in mind. And Gary Trent's new number could jump, OG's number could jump, and Precious' number could jump because they all are fairly young. 23 Gary Trent, 25 OG, and 22 Precious. So the numbers start to get even tighter. Okay, so let's go down here to understand exactly what's going on with these numbers. Okay, so we have a couple numbers down here. I think just want to ignore kind of Svi and Armani for now. That's called dead money. So once we waive Svi, this amount became dead money on our contract or our salary cap, sorry. So that's all included. We're under the salary cap at this moment. We use the MLE to sign Christian Kolokolo. So that number hasn't actually became official on there because I think we're still making maneuvers with our non-guarantee contracts where we signed Josh Jackson non-guaranteed. But all those money amounts will, I think, become dead money like Armani kind of. When you waive someone, there is kind of a small amount that's still left over, depending on what contracts they have, I think. But non-guarantees, I think, don't come right off. So it's interesting. I'll talk maybe a little bit more about that later, but let's look at these numbers. I want to look at the numbers I entered in right here. So, first number at the top is actually the estimated cap. These are projected. They're not exact, but these are about ranges of what the cap salary will be in the year 2020, 2023, 2024. 24, 25, 25, 26, 27, 28. And then the second number. Okay, so you need to understand the way the cap works and how people are assigned. So this first number is kind of like just like an initial thing. It's more meant for this is where the rights come in. So to sign a guy over this first number, you need to have rights. And depending on those rights, you can only offer certain amounts of money over this first number, which is the salary cap. Then the second number is called the luxury tax number, like when you start paying taxes. So even though you're over the cap, you don't actually start paying taxes till you hit a second number. And that room in between those numbers is called the tax apron. So on the tax apron, you usually use your MLE to sign guys because these guys, you're bringing in guys that you don't have rights on. So you have the ability to sign them over this cap number. But that these amounts still go against your total cap. So that apron, so you could be close to the apron and then only be able to use a couple million, because once you're over that apron, I think the MLE is actually not there for use. It's really tricky how it all works out with the MLE and going over that amount, but it's mainly meant for people to use that apron to sign players. And that apron always also goes to vet minimums, two ways, minimums, all that kind of stuff if you're over the cap. So that's how you could sign players, even though you're already over the cap and you have a bunch of signed guys. There is certain allocated money towards signing guys, but it still goes on that apron. So you need to watch out for that. And that's the kind of issue with team building. I think first year, Bobby Masai worked the numbers like geniuses. We're right up against that number. This is pretty much the apron number we're up against. It's I think we have like 4 million more or something, 3 point something, like after Cloco, before these get guaranteed, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But anyways, either way, that's we're under the apron, so we're not paying taxes this year. Okay, and you need to understand something about taxes. So when you go over this second number, you pay luxury tax, and the more you're in it, the more taxes you pay. So there's a rule called the repeat offenders like tax, where you have to kind of multiply that start multiplying that tax each year you're over that number. So it's actually kind of scary, because we'll take a look at our first year a bit, and we're actually already in the tax right off the bat if we re-sign Fred VanVleet and Gary Trent Jr. to reasonable contracts. And I think there's something that hasn't been talked about a little bit. Like, I kind of mistaken, because I was juggling all these numbers in my videos. I thought OG was on this kind of contract here where he had the option this summer. But thank God that OG, we have him for another year, because OG, Gary Trent Jr., and actually our newest guy, Coloco, are all clutch clients, which kind of makes their signings a little bit harder in my mind. Like, it's going to be a little bit more tactical. You have to come correct with that. And I think everyone's not really kind of watching this right now, but I've been discussing the Lakers in a couple like NBA debate channels and stuff like that. I usually go there, talk basketball during the day or something or whatever. And I've been looking at the Lakers' salary cap situation and what options they actually have, because they don't really have any assets, they don't really have any players. And this all goes to team building, I think, so everyone can understand the issue. If they let all their contracts expire, including Russell Westbrook and all these other guys they kind of have signed right now, they will have about 91 million of LeBron and AD, and have about 40 something million to sign players, right? Who's a clutch client? If they end up offering Gary Trent a higher amount and trying to make like a big three with him, AD, and Braun, because I think Gary Trent Jr. could actually fit really well with LeBron, like in the way he plays. He's a great 3 point shooter and kind of plays a bit of defense and kind of feisty, young, growing into his kind of role. So I think they could actually like snatch him if we're not too careful right now. So we need to really look at options. And they're in a weird position because they're right up against it, with only two guys signed. And that's how kind of we'll end up eventually if we don't really kind of sort this issue out in the sense of who we're going to have long term. We have to start locking guys in, locking in their roles, kind of figuring out if they can actually do their roles and stuff like that. So let's look at kind of what the team would look like next year. Because I think we all kind of know what the team's going to look like this year. It's pretty almost set in stone without a trade or anything. But I think there might still be a trade coming. I don't know when. I don't know. Masai doesn't really leak any information. So, okay, so let's actually look at the team next year. I kind of briefly touched on the player options and whatnot. I think even if we go into this year with who we have kind of signed in this frame, I I don't know. I don't think Bobby will like this or Masai will like being over in the taxes for this kind of roster right here. To be honest, the only time we were actually in the tax the last couple years was the championship year. And that was because Marc Gasol was making a massive amount and Kawhi. So once Kawhi kind of left the books, Danny Green and whatever, we were able to kind of extend Siakam, but his contract didn't actually come onto the books till a couple years later. So that's how we were under the cap the next year, even though we still had Marc Gasol's big contract. So being in the tax for this team, I think, is probably not what they're looking at. There are a bunch of options to do here to fill these other spots, but like I think someone needs to be traded. And that's where I think the trade comes in. But if we look at future stuff too, that's where I think we have to trade either Gary Trent or OG Anunoby. Because if we look at the ages here, see, we got Fred VanVleet, Siakam, 28, 28, both lead dogs. We're going to lock them up. They're going to be our two guys that are really going to push the ship in these years. Then we have Scotty, obviously. He's 21, which is the new future. And we have him locked up. Then we have Precious, that is 22. So 1 year off Scotty. See, like this is how it has to work. He has to be 1 year off your star or the same age, kind of, to really group those guys together to build chemistry that's worth going forward with. Because you can't really have Scotty really building chemistry with like DJ Wilson or something. Because when Scotty's in his prime, DJ Wilson's gonna be like 32 or something. So like that's what I'm saying with trying to get guys around Scotty, more his age and younger. First round picks would drop like be under his age, right? If we were to trade either Gary Trent or OG Anunoby, I think we'd get a first or two. So that first or two would eventually come in with an age under Scotty. But see, that pick needs to be a high talent because with this team as now, we're not going to be in the lottery for a bit now, I don't think, because Pascal and Fred VanVleet, I think, can really steer the ship, and we have a bunch of different pieces here that really have an ability to expand their roles and grow. So that's always a worrying thing, though. When you have a lot of young guys, you eventually have to pay them all, and this is what happens. So even if we go into the next year, so look at this year, we lose Thaddeus Young, Kem Birch, Otto Porter Jr., Malachi Flynn, DJ Wilson, and Champagny, and we're over the cap. Let alone re-signing Banton, which I think he'd get a re-sign. Champagny also looks to be in the future. Malachi Flynn needs to show something this year, or he could end up being gone. And Kem, I don't know about a re-sign on that. Otto Porter Jr., we could definitely be looking at a re-sign because he's only 29, and I think he could really fit the system. I think Thad, sorry, but 34, this is his last probably really good contract where he's playing. He might be like a deep bench piece for a playoff team where he comes in if there's catastrophic injuries, but ultimately I think this is probably his last hurrah. As in where I think Otto Porter Jr., the new guy, can kind of be locked up. So I'm not even giving a value. I don't even know if he's even here in the year because he has a player option that he could choose to decline and sign a big contract somewhere else. That's nor here nor there. So if we look at just our core guys, the guys that we like care about, plus Chris Boucher because he got that nice contract, well deserved. And if you see the structure, see how it's front loaded. This is for tradability, but also because Bobby and Masai are aware of our issues. Our contract situations can get crazy. So they tried to front load the contract where we had these guys on smaller contracts. And it's already started. So this is how kind of like I've kind of seen this play because the money's you have to follow the money. The money says a lot. So if we look here, we're 12 million up against the apron. And I think this year, Scotty's last final rookie year, I think we should actually go for it. So, but still, for future building and stuff, how many years do we want to be in that tax? Because look at this number. We're right up against the apron again. And we have even less, and we're losing Chris Boucher. That's because Scotty's contract comes on the books. See how crazy this all gets in a couple years' time? It's because we love to keep everyone. Like, honestly, I'd love to keep all these guys and like be the best team we could. But ultimately, we need to make decisions because if we're in the tax here, we're in the tax here, then we're in the tax here, and then pretty much in the tax here because we have like it's the same situation pretty much. Right up against the apron, have like 6 guys signed. It's not a good situation. You can't build teams like that. You like the Lakers gonna find out it's hard building from this position of just having your big guys signed and nothing else kind of on the side. We have all our picks and stuff like that. So I'm not saying we're gonna be in the same situation as them, but understanding how all these hoops kind of you have to jump through them and you can't even keep all your best talent because this number gets crazy. You end up paying crazy taxes for maybe a team that's not a championship team yet because I don't see it just yet. So we have to make a decision here based on these numbers going forward. We need to lose at least Gary Trent Jr., OG Anunoby, or Fred VanVleet. But obviously, I don't think he's replaceable, to be honest. I think his metrics at shooting guard are ridiculous. Obviously, he can be replaced as a point guard, but as a leader and all that stuff, he's unreplaceable in that way. So we come down to these guys, which is in that weird group here. Not in this group with Siakam and VanVleet in their prime, kind of playing the best ball of their career. Okay, so, and they're not in this group either with Precious and Scotty, the 21, 22, like Kolokolo, 22. Ron Harper Jr. 22, Gabe 22, Banton 22, Justin Champagnie 21. So like there's two distinct groups. Otto Porter Jr. is in this group with Pascal and Fred. Kem in this group, Thad in this group, Chris in this group. So that's the now group. And then we have the tweeners, which won't be our future with the 21s and 22s. But I don't think we could keep salary wise. It's just we're gonna have to make a decision on some of these guys. So it's either Gary Trent or OG. That has to be like we can't keep both. We need to drop one because the starting lineup needs to be at least like a rookie, which is Scotty. So we can have one starter making this kind of money, which in the championship year, if you look back at our cap sheet, that guy was Pascal Siakam. Siakam was only making his third year rookie salary, which actually for Scotty is this. So let's take that in mind in team building, how you have to really build a team into a championship. You have to use these contracts, these rookie contracts, with players that are way better than their rookie contract. Like if Scotty was a free agent before last summer and or this summer and signed, he'd be making probably closer to what Precious Achua would be making like in the next couple of years, like 18 million right off the bat. If he wasn't a future pick, if there was no age specification, his play on the court would entail me to say that he's worth close to 20 million as a starter, a decent starter, you know what I mean? So that's how you get value. He's overperforming the contract. That's what you need, guys to overperform their contract. You sign the guys that are your stable, consistent guys, and those guys will always give you what they give you. But you need the guys on the edges to pop. Like Ben, we need him to be way more than this number here. Champagnie, we need him to be way more than this. If we're going to compete at the highest level, at the playoffs, like, you know what I mean, championship, we need these guys to outperform these numbers. Precious outperform that number. We need Otto to be better than 6 million a year. You know what I mean? That's how you really create like roster value. Having guys on contracts that they outperform. So if we look here, that's why OG is such a great trade chip. Because he's only 25 coming into this season, and he's on a $17 million contract, 18 next year. That's value. Having a great championship 3-and-D starter on that number in your starting lineup makes everything else really easy. Like, because if we look at Philly's situation, they're paying Tobias Harris twice this amount. Tobias Harris twice this amount than OG. See, you can't build a championship team with having inflated contracts of guys that don't perform. And Masai and Bobby are geniuses at it. They don't have any guys like that. We got one guy like that, the DeMar Carroll experiment, and we had to use 2 firsts to drop his contract. So let's not go back to there. So in the end, all this is very like stark and eye-opening that we definitely need to lose about 24 to bring this number down closer off the apron, to have room to sign MLE guys and still have money for our rookies, and our development system still needs a fraction of salary to still be our development system. We need to have that money allocated each year to be able to sign certain prospects, to check up on them, see if they can really push up into the lineup. I think Justin Champagny was one, and he really showed he could be something. Ben was a pick, second round pick, but second round picks don't have like designated contracts. It's all just minimum stuff after the second round. First round picks have actually set in stone numbers that they get at each position. So those contracts are formed in a first round pick contract. Bird rights, all that means is we kind of like, they're still on the team that drafted them or traded. The rights have been traded to each team and they re signed again. So, Fred VanVleet, we got him undrafted. We've had him the whole time. We have all his rights. Gary Trent, we traded Portland for him, and Portland drafted him, so we have his rights. OG, we drafted, we have his rights. Boucher was undrafted, and we signed him. And the way it works, after a bunch of years of having a guy under contract, I think it's about 3 years, his rights upgrade to Bird or whatever. There's a lot of different stuff. It's not really much to get into right here. But Thaddeus, interesting. At one point, he went through a 3 year stretch and then re signed with every team he was traded to after that. Scotty, yeah, we're good. We don't have to worry about that. See, this is where it comes to. When you're waived, you lose all rights. No team has your rights anymore. And basically, you have to go out on the market and look for a team that is under this number or over this number and has MLE space. That's how it works. So, Otto Porter Jr., Warriors couldn't keep him. So we signed him using the MLE. So we didn't need rights to go over the cap here. Is pretty simple how you get guys like based on that. And there's also a biennial exception where you have to sign a guy to like 2 years, I think. And it's like 4 million. We had a couple guys on that contract before, notably Stanley Johnson. So, okay. And we used the MLE to sign Koloko. That's a different like thing because we signed him to an actual NBA contract, and we were over the salary already because we actually used Chris Boucher's bird rights and signed him over the cap. So what we did pretty much is sign Chris Boucher, we re-signed Thaddeus Young, and then we signed. So like that term matters, re-signed and signed. So Thaddeus Young can actually be traded right now. Where Otto Porter Jr. and I think Chris Boucher. Yeah, no, he might have made under the 20% max. So I'd have to check into it. I'm not too sure. I'm not too worried about him right now. Okay, so bottom line, I think through explaining all this, hopefully it hasn't been too much of a mess, but we have to kind of lose a guy to keep flexibility in the future to be able to really fill this team out and have the best team possible. Because even if we trade for a star, that number just goes crazier and everything gets more complicated, obviously. But see, this is where I was thinking that if we traded OG Anunoby and Malachi Flynn, you can see Well, and I said speed, but we waived speed, so he wasn't even really needed in the deal, I don't think. This is what matters. So Flynn's money next year. So he's gonna make almost 4 million. OG's close to 19. Like so, under 23. So if we trade OG for Turner, Turner wants a 20 and over. So if we get him on 20, that works out even better. So that number would drop about 3 million. So we'd have a million under this tax apron. And that's the type of moves I think that's what we're gonna have to be looking at. Something like that. Gary Trent, obviously, if we trade him, we lose more money under that apron cap. I think for the first year, but it's the same dealio kind of in the second year. So it's ultimately, I think, just based on a decision, either or. And I think even in the long term, we're not going to end up keeping both of them, and it's going to be more Precious, Scotty, Banton, Coloco, Champagny, guys that are younger, kind of in that group. We want to start building chemistry with these guys. We want to start really getting them going, like we sort of did with Chris Boucher, OG Anunoby, Fred VanVleet, and Siakam. They've been playing for a long time now, and how you build a core. You start them off when they're young, and you kind of build their chemistry between each other, bench mob, all that stuff, and that's how you build a core for the future. And you have to get talent. This is important. Talent. He was a pick. He was a pick. And Fred VanVleet undrafted, we got so lucky with him that we found him and he was the player he was. I think our development obviously helped him, but I think in the end we were lucky to get him. But if you look at this new group, see we have Precious kind of almost locked in, I think, depending, to kind of be that OG. We have Scotty, the man, Scotty Van. Man, Scotty, woo, he's going to be making tons of money in the future. He's obviously our future. The guy we need to plan this new team around that I'm talking about, the 20 somethings, the early 20 somethings guys. He's the piece. He's the new piece. He's the new Siakam. See that? See how that tandem works? And I think in actuality, he's more the Pascal version of Van Vliet. He's going to be our point guard. So we need another star forward to go with Scotty that fits with Precious and fits with Scotty, and we need to build that chemistry up. Our own pick, I don't think, is going to be high enough this year to really be be in the range of the talent that we need to get that guy at. Because if we're looking at competing for a championship, we need to get the best talent around Scotty. We're not just putting together something here. We want to build something really good. So we need a really talented piece to go with Scotty. And we can't just get him undrafted or some weird out different situation that we can find guys anywhere kind of deal. We need to get him in the first round and above the position our own firsts are going to be in. So that trade needs to happen. So right now, as we look at it, as we stand, we need first contracts to kind of supplement guys that are more talented than the money we can afford to pay them to keep competing and actually win a championship in these next couple of years. Because that's what the goal is. If we're just here to be good, we can pay all these guys and pay a little luxury, wait till these guys drop off, sign up a couple of cheap guys. But that's not, I don't think that's what Masai and Bobby are doing. They plan for the future. They they see things before they happen. I know they are looking at this like night and day. This is the decision that will make or break these next couple years for us. I think it's ultimately a really big decision, and I wouldn't want to be the person making it. My suggestion is the Turner and first for OG and Flynn, and we get those first to get around Scotty to help us with this value. Two guys on a first round salary, which is it'll be under this because it's under the fourth pick. I think Indiana can guarantee the picks, and I'm fine with that too. But the guarantees need to be like if it moves to next year, lower protection. So let's say the 23 gets 10 protection. So 10 and up, it gets pushed to the next year. But then the next year needs to be 1 to 5. And the other pick's similar. So Indy can protect itself against the full tanking of the situation and protect their butt. And obviously that would open them up to maybe, because we want to try to get from 10 to 20. I think that range can really improve the ceiling of our new team, the 21, 22 kind of ceiling team, and help Scotty really, really win. Because I really believe in Scotty. From what I've seen, man, we got a real one, a real special guy that, like, I think could be all time great. He's got this kind of like edge. He wants to be just nothing but greatness. He just wants to be great, and I think this is all of it. Kind of is more for him. The way we need to kind of move into his contract years. Like I was saying, we have to kind of go all out on this year with salary. So obviously I'd push into the luxury in this year. But then we have to manage the roster after those years, because these guys are getting a bit like, after these couple contracts will be a bit older and deserve length in their prime, you know? Like, so it's going to be interesting to see what Bobby and Masai do, but hopefully this opened people's eyes to kind of like what how the team is looking and how this team building thing goes, and kind of the guys that really love this kind of stuff, the team building and the salary stuff, kind of see the problem. And some Raptor fans are saying we need to trade OG or Gary Trent Jr. only because of this. Only because of this. Because I love them both. I love them both. They both fit here. They're both great. Honestly, this was really fun. This whole series, it's going to be fun to look back, I guess, in like a year or a couple years, or whenever I look back at this series, to kind of see where it all started, this whole journey on YouTube. My journey on YouTube, kind of, it's going to be interesting. So, man, it's been a great one. It's been a long one. Hopefully, you have a great day. I just want to say, bless to be a Raptors fan. Bless to live in Toronto and be a Toronto man. And I think I'm just going to end this first series off with the only words that seem correct in a video like this. All, don't worry, be happy, trust in Masai. See you guys.